But I'll make sure the sound person doesn't turn you on. So if you quick run.
Yeah, we don't want to hear all my conversations. Cool.
Yeah, that's always the story, is somebody that goes to the bathroom. We only do it once. Right, Tom.
Love that organ. That is pretty up there. Am I on the microphone? No.
Good evening. Good evening, good evening. Come on, give me something. Good evening. Hey, there you go. Come on, wake up. It's only 7 o'clock. We can be awake around here. So good to see all of you. Quite honestly, I guess it's fair to say I am impressed and grateful for the number of you who've been willing to come out, able to come out at this time. I think we're all just desperately trying to find our way out from COVID, and this looks like a real sign to me that we are moving in that direction. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It's wonderful. My name is Pastor Tom Skornavaki. I am the pastor at Common Ground Recovery Community, and one of the hosts here, along with Caron Treatment Centers. Yay. I've lost count, but I think this is our 12th. See, the first one was in 2009. Yeah, so this is 12 years, but we missed a little bit of time in between, thanks to our friend, Mr. COVID. But just to know that we've had that many speakers going on for this long. So welcome. Just a little note. I mean, it's only an hour, so you're probably going to be able to hang in there, but if not, go out that door and follow around this wall. And kind of underneath that organ over there is where you'll find the restrooms. But this is a 1-hour event. Hopefully you're going to be able to hang in there for that. I think that's really all I have to say. Oh, one other thing. So we'll announce these as they go along, but on Tuesday, December 7th, we'll have Daphne Willis here. There's flyers that you can get that'll give you all this information. You're also probably getting email blasts from Caron. You're getting email blasts from Common Ground. You can find us on Common Ground Recovery Community Facebook page, and we'll get a link for this and send it out to you, but you will be able to see this streaming tomorrow. So if you have friends that you want to say, oh, this was really great, you ought to see it, they'll be able to do that, and you will get a link that'll allow you to connect to that. So with that, I want to introduce Rocky Stallone.
Good evening, everybody. I can't believe we're actually doing this. It's been a couple years, and I was saying to my boss just about an hour and a half ago, like I didn't feel right all day today, and I was like, I didn't know if I was nervous or what the heck was going on. I just realized when I got in a parking lot, I'm just really excited, to be back out, to have an event like this that Caron can co-sponsor with Tom and Common Ground. It's just a wonderful thing. And when we met just a couple months ago to talk about whether we were going to do this or not, it was a resounding yes, we're doing it for sure. It's time. And we went through a list of speakers and everything else like that, and I wrote down everybody's name, but I knew who was going to be number one. So that's why I asked him to be here tonight. But I'm just really excited that you're all here. I see so many familiar faces I haven't seen for years. Sam, Brandon, I haven't seen some of these folks for years, and it's so nice that you're here. I appreciate that. And I just, I think I would be remiss if I didn't I just want to say it would be nice if our thoughts could go out to Jeff K. and recognize the fact that this is a struggle for those of us in recovery, and thank God there's a solution, and here we are, here we are. So when I was sitting in that meeting and trying to decide, like I made up my mind right away who the speaker was going to be without telling anybody, I had met this gentleman actually through one of my sponsees in New Hope, Pennsylvania. I had traveled to see this guy every week, and he wanted me to go to this meeting in Lambertville, New Jersey. He says, "You're not going to believe this guy that's there. He's the real Marlboro man." And I'm like, I quit smoking years ago, but I still think the Marlboro man's pretty cool. So I come to work at Caron, and it turns out that there's a connection there to Harmony Hollow, which is a farm in Lambertville where they help people in recovery through working with horses and other animals and working the 12 steps. And when I met Brad, when you have that instant connection, the other guy or the other person you're talking to is in recovery like within 3 seconds. I knew it instantly. And Brad just put me at ease instantly. And through several conversations, we got him here. And when I asked him how I could introduce him, I went through all kinds of stuff that I had heard about him, because of course I checked him out. And his response to that was, "Why don't we just leave that alone?" I think Brad's probably the epitome of humility, but his message is strong. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker for this evening, Brad L.
Okay, does it work? You guys didn't get the memo about the Western theme? You didn't get that? Trick or treat. Hey everybody, my name is Brad Langenberg and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict, compulsive overeater, bulimic, codependent, nicotine, caffeine, little love addiction. Here I am, you stir it all together. And I didn't know that when I started this journey. I was thinking about it when I came up here that there's a song. Do you guys remember that song, Carly Simon's song, "You're So Vain, you think that song's about you"? I used to listen to that song, and I used to think that song was about me. I'd actually sing, and I had this all memorized, how my eyes would dip for no one else as I walked onto the yacht or the Learjet or whatever it was. I'm really grateful. Thank you guys for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege to come and speak about my recovery because I have a gift. I didn't quit drinking. Something intervened. And I always kind of like to start because you can start my whole story, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now really didn't happen. That's when I got sober. Because what happened for me is I'm a country kid from Nebraska. That's why I have this costume. And for where I came from, this was a badge of honor that I could have the cowboy hat, to have a nice hat, to have the belt buckle, to have my name on the back of my belt. That was a badge of honor. But what I remember real distinctly, and it has to do with step one, and it's something I've never forgot, is I was driving around a country road in Nebraska by myself, and I had a bottle of Jack Daniels and a bag of cocaine. And I was driving down this country road, and what I'll never forget is still kind of an emotional thing for me. And the cocaine, I was using a chapstick lid to stick into the bag, and I put it up to my nose, and I'd smash my nose together to get a hit because I didn't want to chop it up. But what I remember most distinctly was as the bottle went up to my mouth, and the cocaine went up to my nose with tears running down my face, me going, "No, no, please stop. Please, please stop." And so what happened for me that night, and we were talking about spirituality, but for me, spirituality is so simple. It's being less mental. I have to do it when I walk into a room. So when I walk into a room, I try to become one with the room. I try to look up and around. I place things in the room because I have to get myself centered and grounded. But what happened for me that night, by the time I got sober, I had cocaine, alcohol, painkillers. My dad had gotten 3 fingers cut off in an accident. I had cocaine, alcohol. I was taking 7 different types of steroids. I was taking epinephrine and shooting it intramuscularly. I shouldn't tell you guys this, but there's something called DMSO. And I was taking Percocet, and I was crushing it up in DMSO, and I was rubbing it on my skin and my joints. I was taking something they call check drops that they give female dogs in heat, and I'm not really sure why. You know why I was taking that? But that's what was happening for me. So that last night was I was driving down the country road. By the time I got into the end of my using, I went to my parents' place, and my dad's a cattle feeder in Nebraska. And so I was living in the basement. So I went down into the basement, and I couldn't find that place. I couldn't find that high. I was doing cocaine, I was drinking, I was smoking pot, I was taking the painkillers, and this had started like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. By 12, and by this time, I didn't have people around me. I was completely by myself getting high. And I just couldn't stop, and I couldn't find that place. I couldn't find that even ground. It wasn't going away. And something happened to me that night, and I've been chasing it ever since. What happened was I laid down, and I couldn't get my breath. And this is an emotional thing for me because I have not forgot. I couldn't get my breath, and I don't know if I said it out loud or if I just thought it. But I couldn't get my breath, and I was struggling. There's been a lot of things happen in my life recently, so I'm a little bit more emotional than other times. But anyway, what happened was I couldn't get my breath, and I said, God, whatever it is you want me to do, I'll do. And at that moment, everything subsided. I could get my breath, and it wasn't like I had never gotten high. I got that gift, and what happened for me, I had that bright light moment, but it wasn't like the bright light moment that it lit up, the room lit up, but I got this bright light moment that I saw my innermost self as I really was. A, that I was a drug addict and alcoholic, but B, that I was full of you-know-what, and I'd been faking it all my life. And you know what happened for me that night, and the reason I say I've been chasing this all my life was that I got to a place where I knew I could do nothing for myself from myself. And when I got to that place of complete surrender where I could do nothing for myself from myself, something came in and did it for me. And I've been chasing that ever since, and I'll never forget that. And my life completely changed at that moment. So I come from a town of 190 people in Nebraska. It's pretty small. It's actually so small that I have a picture of me standing at the beginning of town that says 190. And if you look really close in the back of the picture, you can see the other end of town. So that night, before I went back home, I'd been to California one time, and I went there in a blackout. I drank. What I remember is in Las Vegas. That was where the connecting flight was for Los Angeles. And I'd been snorting cocaine off the trays and playing cards. I got somebody to do it with me, and I was pretty blatant about it. This has been a long time ago. This has been in the 80s. And the flight attendant was getting pretty done with me, and I asked her for some more wine, and she looked at me with a really disgusted look like, "Sir, you've drank it all." So I had this nasty wine hangover, and I was in California. My buddy was a professional bodybuilder in Venice, California, and he was telling me everything about Venice, but I had this nasty hangover, and I mean, it's really bright, and there's a ton of people, and I mean, I'm a drug addict. I mean, I need cloud cover. And I was like, why would you want to live here? There's just a wall of people. But what did meet is I met his girlfriend there. And I said, John, his name was John. I said, John, your girlfriend, you got to watch her, man. She's a drug addict. That night, when I was driving around, I stopped at a payphone, and we had the payphones in Nebraska where you could call through your car, you pull your car alongside because it was snowing. And I called him up, and I was talking to him, and I said, I need help. And he said, that woman that you thought was a drug addict, she's been clean for 6 months. Why don't you call her? So I called her up, and I'm not real sure what she said. I don't know if I was really listening. because I was still drinking and doing cocaine. Every once in a while I'd say, just a second, I'll be right back. And then she would talk some more. The next day she called me. After I had that experience, she called me and she said, I've been checking around and I had no money. So I was going to have to go to my hometown bank and borrow the money. And that wasn't really something I wanted to do, to go into that small town bank and tell them I was a drug addict and alcoholic and they needed to go to treatment. So anyway, she said, we have this program out in Los Angeles that I got sober in. Why don't you come on out here and do this program? You can stay with your friend John, stay on the floor. He said, you can do that. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you can always borrow the money and go to treatment. I did not want to go there, but I thought, you know what, I'll do anything. So that happened March 6th. March 11th, I was going into Los Angeles, California. And I can still remember coming down the 10 freeway. Nebraska, football's a big thing in Nebraska, just like it's big here, but there was so much traffic, I thought, is there a football game going on? What's going on? But I was so overwhelming that I almost turned around. So I drove all the way there, drove 2 hours. They said, don't use or anything else. So I was chewing tobacco, smoking cigarettes, drinking tons of coffee. And so I get there that morning. She came to get me at noon. She goes, I'm going to come and we're going to go to this meeting at noon. So she came there. It was so interesting, and this is how things had changed, because you couldn't tell me anything. I used to tell people I could walk on water. But she came there and she goes, hey, you ready to go to this meeting? I said, her name was Tina. I could never find her again. But her name was Tina, and I said, you know what, Tina, I've been traveling for 2 days. Can we do this tomorrow? And she looked at me with that face of disgust. And I went, what am I doing? I just drove 2 days. So I went to this meeting. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I went to this meeting. It was an AA meeting. They had me read something. I remember I was shaking so bad I could barely look at it and read it. And all they did was, I thought that they were going to sign me up afterwards, and they said, just come back. So my sobriety consists as I go to a meeting in the morning, drive around, go to the gym, go to the meeting in the afternoon, drive around, go to the gym, go to another meeting, go to dinner. That's how this thing started for me. I'm really, really grateful for what I found here, because what I found here was an answer that I had a prayer when I was a little boy. Because the reason that I'm in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous is because that didn't work for me. That part in the Bill Wilson, when he talked in the book, that I'm paraphrasing, but I think I have it down pretty close. He said, the drive for success was on. I was going to prove to the world that I was important. See, when I was a little boy, I had a lot of trauma in my life. I had a brother and sister. I'm an only child. And they had brain diseases, so they would have seizures about once a week, and we'd have to shake them. They'd turn blue to make them breathe. And so there was a lot of trauma going on there, and I just didn't ever know how. I was always so uncomfortable in my own skin. But when I was a little boy growing up, where I came from, the cowboy was popular, and he got the girls. So I did everything I could to be a cowboy. Like where I came from, my mom wouldn't let me chew tobacco till I was 6. So I used to chew. Do any of you guys know what candle wax is? It comes in the squares. You know what it is, right? So I couldn't do that, so I don't know where I got this from. So I would ball up candle wax, and I put it in my cheeks so it looked like red men. So we'd be out gathering cattle, and those guys would spit, and I'd spit right with them. And I had my name on the back of my belt buckle. Then when I got my Copenhagen can, I had my name in the top of my Copenhagen can. And I thought, gosh, if I could just be a cowboy, if I could be and act like a cowboy, then I'd feel okay. The tough part about that, when I went to high school, all of a sudden they kind of made fun of my cowboy costume. And where I came from, the athlete was popular, and he got the girl. Wrestling is a big thing in Nebraska. In my school, all the wrestlers were considered like gods, and I thought, no, if I could become a wrestler, then I'm going to feel okay, and then I'm going to be comfortable inside, and I won't have fear of people anymore. And that's where the eating disorder came into play, because I learned a little trick. I learned a secret that I didn't want to tell anybody. I learned how to binge and purge, how to make weight. That became an issue when I got sober. But what I really remember is I won this state championship. And after it was over, I was sitting with my grandfather. I can still remember this so distinctly. And the guy that had beaten me the year before came walking by. I don't know what he said, but my mind said it was derogatory. And for the first time, I really realized, I felt all the air come out of my balloon. It just went, poof, and I went, wow, it didn't work. And the other thing that happened, and it kind of showed me a little bit about what my life was like, is when I went home, they had big signs all around my driveway. It was about a mile long. There's big signs that said, welcome home, state champion, you're number one, everything else. There was a bunch of them. The minute I got home, I saw those and I tore them all down. I thought I didn't deserve it. I just tortured myself for 2 years. So after that, I thought, I weighed 155 pounds, but I wanted to go to college and play football because I thought, I'm from Nebraska. If you play football, then I'm going to feel okay, right? And I wanted to play linebacker. So 155 pounds is a little tough. So I thought for sure if I could just become football. So I was going to play football, and I went to college. I was going to play football. I got hurt right off the bat. Kind of gave that up, but I did notice there were some guys that were really into lifting weights, and I noticed this when I was a little kid. I went with my dad. We were shipping cattle to Omaha, and we went into this place, and we would have breakfast after we unloaded the cattle, and there's a guy that came walking in, and I watched people. Everybody kind of lit it, and I think his name was Jim. I mean, I was little. And I can still remember he had this maroon striped shirt, and he had, like the fawns, that slick back hair, but he had arms this big. And I remember the look on the waitress's face when he came walking in, and she smiled and she got close, and everybody knew his name and everybody was warmed up to him, but he was this big muscular guy. And I thought, that's it. When I went to college, there were some guys there that got into lifting weights, and I started getting lifting weights, and I did all that. And at one time I've weighed about 245. I've squatted and deadlifted over 600. I've benched over 4. But what happened for me is that fear was still there. When I'd get up in front of people, I'd meet somebody, and really oddly enough, there was a friend, he's gone now, his name's Alan Friedman. I met this guy, and he's about this tall. They started Borsheim's Jewelry in Omaha. Alan's about this tall. And I came walking up to him one time, and this was kind of my introduction to sobriety, and I'll never forget this guy, and I'll tell you later in the story. But I came walking up to Alan, and I said, hey, you want a drink? And he goes, no thanks, I don't drink. And I said, do you want some cocaine? He goes, no thanks, I don't want any. I don't do cocaine. And I was like, how do you do that? And that stuck in my mind for the longest time. But anyway, to get back to that, I really got into lifting weights, and I thought for sure if I could get to that place, I would feel okay, and it just never felt okay. I can still remember the first time I went to school. So I came in my big class. My graduating class in high school was 30 people. But I remember the first day to going into school, they had to take several schools to get there, and I came walking in, and there was a guy there, his name's Bob Huffman, and I went to reach out to, he stuck his hand out to shake it. And I was like, somebody tell me who to be. Somebody tell me how to handle this. I didn't know how to be, I didn't know what to do. But I found when I was in high school, I went to my first party. And at that party, I blacked out, I got sick. I think I still found that pillow the last time I was home that I got sick into. But I remember the next time, that was on Saturday or Monday when I came walking in, people were going, wow, you're funny. They had a bright smile. Wow, you were entertaining. I don't remember what I did, but you were entertaining. And I went, I'm home. When I took that drink, I felt okay. I felt smarter. I could walk into the bar. I remember my hometown, I would drive 5 miles out of the road just so I didn't have to drive down Main Street and see these people again. Do I say hi, not say hi? So I didn't have to go through that uncomfortability. I had such anxiety in society. That's why I say, I'm in these rooms because that didn't work for me. I did everything I possibly could to add something to myself in sobriety. So get to the spiritual aspect, I'll jump to that, is that for me, there is nothing, I've been trying to attain something all my life to feel okay. I come into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I start this spiritual journey, and I realize on the spiritual journey I need not attain anything. It's about the absence of letting go of something. Confidence is my true state. I just have it covered up. My family they're in kind of a different kind of religion, and I had a real tough time with it. And there was a lot of loud stuff going from the pulpit, and They were talking about latter days, and I was like, I just want to make it through this day. I don't really care what happened in the latter days. I just don't want to know how to deal. I remember sitting here just going, at like 10 after this happened, quarter after this happened, and I'm just watching the clock, and I know what's happening so I can get out of there. So what happened for me, like I said, I got sober, and I have to say that I am my private thoughts, not my public speeches. I've learned really soon that, I can talk this thing. And what's really interesting about Alcoholics Anonymous is that in the book, I love the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think it's an amazing thing. I love sponsorship. I think it's an amazing thing. I love meetings. I think it's really, and I go to a ton. Everywhere I go to meetings. Nowhere in that first 164 pages does it say go to a meeting or call your sponsor. There's more to be done. This is a spiritual program. This is about how do I connect to this energy that I call God. And I really struggled with that. But like I said, I had that experience that night, and I've been chasing it ever since. There was a guy, you guys ever heard of Chuck Chamberlain? Anybody heard of him? He was the original circuit speaker. And what really got my attention, I struggled in the beginning of my sobriety. So if you're new, like I said, I had an eating disorder. I was chewing 3 cans of Copenhagen a day. I was drinking so much espresso, I was painting at this place, and I went walking into this coffee shop. And as I went walking in later that afternoon, the woman I came through, she goes, I'm not giving you any more. That's crazy. You can't drink that much espresso. My friends would come over, and I had an espresso machine. They go, every time I come over and have an espresso with you, I think I went through relapse. So I would get so lit up, there'd be like lightning bolts bouncing off my head. But joy's happy and free, right? My eating disorder came up, and I would go to Ben & Jerry's. I go to a meeting, talk about gratitude. I go to Ben & Jerry's, and I was too embarrassed to say that I was going to eat the cake, so I'd make up names for birthdays and take it home and eat the thing myself. I struggled with that. It took me a while. It took a while for it to settle. But what really happened instead on that journey is I realized that Chuck Chamberlain, he had a book called New Pair of Glasses. There was something interesting about him. And I come to find out what he talked about, he didn't learn in AA at all. There was another religion that he went to. So I followed him. And I started going to that religion, trying to figure out what they were talking to. And I met a therapist back there, and he was the longest licensed addiction therapist in the state of California. His name was Jim Dunnigan. And I was really struggling. I had a year of sobriety, and I can know exactly where I was at. I called him up, and I was full of anxiety, full of fear. And I go, Jim, what am I going to do? What am I doing wrong? I'm going to these meetings. I'm doing all this stuff, but I'm still full of anxiety and fear. And he said, one day at a time won't work for you. And I was like, okay, now I'm blown. What am I going to do? And he goes, get out a piece of paper and a pen. And he had me write down, I am now, draw a line, exclamation mark. Okay, what am I going to do with that? He goes, what are you doing next? I go, I'm going to get in the shower, and I'm going to go to an AA meeting. So he said, well, here's what you're going to do. I'm now picking up the shampoo bottle. I'm now taking off the cap. I had hair. I'm now washing my hair. I'm now brushing my teeth. I'm now walking to the door. I'm now opening the door. And you know what? I found a little relief from that. And I kind of played with that for a while, and that set me on a whole other journey. And, Bill Wilson talks about it in several different places. He talks about it there's a place in the language of the heart that he was talking about. I'm going to these meetings. I'm reciting my drunkalog. I'm working with other people, but I feel like they're missing something. For me, meditation isn't, and he talked about I had a misunderstanding of prayer meditation. For me, meditation is something I can do right now. And what I mean by that, I can start to be aware of where my hands are at. I can be aware of the expression on my face as I'm aware of the expression on your face. I can start to be aware of the tone of my voice. I can start to become one with the room. I can start to know what's going on inside of me. There's anxiety, different things that go inside of me. Notice the noise. So for me, that is my meditation. Prayer for me is what I'm thinking is a prayer. What I go about through my day is a prayer. You'll see me if we do a lot of, I got involved in equine therapy, and a lot I learned about God, I learned from horses, believe it or not. But like I said, I kind of put my cowboy costume away, and when I went out to California, I got around horses again, and There was a guy out in Sierra Tucson named Wyatt that was doing equine therapy, and I'd heard about him, and I always wanted to do it. So I started looking into that. But I noticed there were some people that were really great therapists, and there were some people that were pretty good horsemen, but there really hadn't been somebody that could do both. And I've been fortunate enough. Anybody? How many people have seen the movie The Horse Whisperer? Anybody see that? You seen that? So that movie was about 3 men, not one. And I got a chance to spend time with all 3 of those men, and it was just amazing what they could get done with a horse. And what's really fascinating, it works with dogs too, is that I had to be able to catch a behavior. I had to be able to catch a thought before it became a behavior. Same thing I have to do with myself. It's kind of like anybody had your dog where you wanted to have it stay. So usually what happens, people tell their dog to, lay down, stay, and then they walk away, and their dogs, and then they go, no, wait, stay, and then they go back and forth. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? But if I sit there and watch real closely, and I catch it when he just goes, I think I'm going to move, and I say, he will never forget that. And the same thing happens when I reward that. But what was interesting is there was a guy named Tom Dorrance. That's who that book was partly about. And I met Tom Dorrance, and he told me, I went up to him, and I was talking to him. He said, Brad, when you come walking up to that horse knows everything about you because he's not thinking, he's watching you. He's observing you. He knows if you have more weight on your right foot or your left foot. He knows the wrinkles on your skin. He knows the expression on your face. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. And then I tried to do that. I couldn't do it. I had all these preconceived ideas about this person. And, for me, if I'm really living in this moment, I should not deal with you from yesterday. No matter what happened, I should deal with you directly in this moment. 100%. But also what happened is I started working with horses, and that movie, The Horse Whisperer, was shot up in Montana. And I met a gentleman that owned a ranch that overlooked that valley. And that's where things started to open up for me a little bit. I went up to that valley, and I remember I was sitting up there with my horse, and I had my dog, and I was overlooking this, and I'm looking towards Yellowstone. And I can see probably 150 miles. It's beautiful. And I was sitting up there, and I realized I always thought it was nature and me. And it hit me that, oh my God, I am nature. I was meant to be one with it. But see, what happens for me is that when I first got sober, the mind was king and my spirit was its slave. Where I'm going my sobriety, where the spirit is king and my mind is his obedient servant. The only way I found for me to get through heaven is I need to be able to get above the intellect. It talks about it in We Agnostics. What they're talking about is I worship my intellect. I was worshiping my thoughts. Tom? Is that Tom? I don't know all the Bible verses, but one thing that really caught me, and because it took me a while, and what I realized for me is the more I understood about this character named Brad Langenberg, the meanings of the Bible just started opening up. Because I realized that one way to find, I think one of the best ways to find God is through the study of man. But in the Bible it says the carnal mind is at enmity with God. It is not under the law of God, for it cannot be. Isn't that correct? And I went, oh my gosh, I've been living for that mind. And when I go there, I'm completely unplugged. See, I live in such a competitive place. And what the really difficult thing is, all those things that I said and I did out there when I was drinking and using, the really difficult thing to swallow is drugs and alcohol didn't make me say and do those things. Drugs and alcohol took away all my inhibitions, so that's what came out. So now what I do, I put the lid on it. See, I've been faking it all my life. The one thing I know that everyone in this room has in common and everyone out there is we're all fear-based, doing everything we can to cover it up. As a young man, I was taught, put on the cowboy costume, get as big as you can, play the sports, look good, have the beautiful woman, get as much money you can, you're going to feel okay. It never worked for me. I was fortunate enough that where I lived in California, I'll never forget, my first job too was, and it kind of got me, as my first job working there was a mental hospital. You ever heard of CPC Westwood? CPCs, do you remember those? Community Psychiatric Centers. They actually, one day they came and got everybody in handcuffs and they closed them. They're a Fortune 500 company. But I was working there and we had a lockup place, and so I've seen people that true multiple personality would change in front of me and I'd have to do the intake. But I'd be doing these intakes on these people and I'd be asking them how they think and feel, and I'd be asking these questions and they'd be telling me, and the whole time I'd be going, I think like that, and I feel like that. Going, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And that's when I realized that I have a dis-ease of the mind. And if I have a dis-ease of the mind, it'd be wise to use that thing less. And with Jim Dunnigan, when he was talking to one time, he went to a meeting. He was up at a pulpit just like this. And he said the chief problem with the alcoholic that he's asleep and he needs to wake up, and he hit the podium. I was so in my head, so troubled by something, but when he hit that podium, I jumped up and all my troubles were gone. I couldn't remember what they were. And I went, oh my gosh, it's in the way that I think. This has nothing to do with my drinking. So what's the spiritual part? First, I have to start to be aware of what I'm really like, to be gut level honest. I didn't know when the word personality comes from the Latin word persona, that means mask. And I was taught to have the best mask possible. And what I want to do in Alcoholics Anonymous is go, here I am. This is what I'm really like. And you know what? God answers that. My prayers have gotten very, very simple. God help me. You know, before I used to really doctor it up and I tried to come up with all kinds of things, but I realized the creator of the universe knows what's in my heart. It's not about what's in the words. What I'm trying to find in this place is to find that place of purity where I can connect. You know, all my life is that when I realized God's will, I was always thought God's will was to do something. You know, I was always to be that person, but I realized, no, I don't ask God what to do anymore. I ask God what to be. Two different things. Because if I'm okay inside, if my being's on track, everything changes out there. Completely. I can still remember I was standing at the beach in California, there's a plastic ball was laying there, and I threw it out in the ocean. Guess what happened with that plastic ball? It came back. And that's when I realized that everything that I put out there comes back to me. It's the energy that I put out there. I didn't know this. Did you guys know that all living organisms have the same genetic code? The DNA difference, but the same genetic code. And you know, it talks about in our big book that we can't take credit for anything. But see, what we do is I was taught about success and failure. And what I realized is that I can't label myself a success or a failure unless I compare myself somehow. And see, I was taught in a world to compare and be competitive. And all I have to do is stop this duality that I've lived in all my life. Where I have done equine therapy in California, it's called Pacific Palisades, because where I'm at is kind of a privileged area. But I've worked with the homeless kids on Venice Beach, an interesting group, and I worked with gang kids from East LA, and these guys are tatted all the way to here. Most of them have seen somebody murdered or killed, or friends been killed. And I used to have them up there and work with them, but also just because I was located, I've had movie stars on my horses. I've had billionaires, people from the Forbes list on my horses. I've also had the heavyweight champion of the world on my horse. You know what was really cool? Horse didn't know the difference. But what that horse did know is that horse knew who was separate from it and who wasn't. That horse knew who could connect to it and who wasn't. And what I got from that, the same thing with my God. The God of my understanding doesn't think of Bill Gates as a big success and the janitor at McDonald's as a failure. That's all man-made. That doesn't know the difference in gender, color, didn't know any of that difference. It's just who could connect to it and who couldn't. And I think that's where my higher power is. So this moment right here, we always talk about God's will. The only thing that I know for sure of myself, and I really suggest this, don't believe in anything in 12-step program. Go out, find out for yourself, and then no one can take it away. There's a hilltop in Montana that I've gone to, and it's so pretty up there. I was telling you a little bit about it. And you know, I could give you some books about it. I could give you some tapes. You could listen to some talks, and pretty soon you could give talks about it too. But it's not the same as going there. See, what happens a lot of times is I was using words like God and love, and I didn't know anything about him. The word gold is not gold. I want the real thing. I want to go as far as I possibly can. Jim said, there's going to people say, don't go up there. There's nothing up there. In sobriety, you can go as far as you want in sobriety. As I found, it wasn't either you grow or go. It's either you grow or just plateau. But what happened is, working with these horses and realizing that horse is meditation, it's always right now. He's not thinking, gosh, I wish I lived across the street, or I was a Palomino or a Appaloosa. He's content being a horse. And that's the same thing. I was up in Montana. I realized that nature's always going forward. It's always changing, but it's always right now. And we talk about God's will, and this is just my thing on God's will. God's will for me, if He created, or it created this moment, I should be 100% present for it. The trouble is, I have a mind. And that mind is thinking and planning and thinking and planning. Trying to play chess. If you say this, I'll say that. And if I say this, maybe you'll say that. I'm trying to maneuver and manipulate everything. See, before I got sober, I used to say, nobody tells me what to do, right? Wrong. Everybody told me what to do. If you looked at me one way, the balloon got big. If you looked at me one other way, the balloon deflated. If the girl called me back, the balloon got big. If she didn't call me back, it deflated. If the bank account's big, it's inflated. If it's less, it deflated. That's not freedom. And what I found with that is my God doesn't have a memory. It's just like I said, nature's always going forward. It's always changing. It's always right now. We do these steps and we go out there and make amends because we can't let go of the past. Because I've lived so mental all my life. But I'm really connected with this thing, God, and being right into this moment. Something really beautiful happens. I came in here and I wanted to have power so bad. And I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and I realize when I cease to want power over everyone and everything, I have power over everyone and everything. When I cease to want that, that's when the power enters. I didn't know. Did you know the origin of the word ego is I? Or the origin of the word I is ego? Yeah. What's the most number one word used in the English language? I did this, I did that. So I've always said that I can, and we talk about conscious contact. And for me, I can either have I can have a thought life, conscious contact, or I can have conscious awareness or a thought life. I can't have both. And what's happened for me is here, and it talks about it in our book, I live in a world, in the 12 and 12, it says, I live in a world riddled with envy. One of my difficult things that I had with people is I wasn't really seeing them clearly. I wasn't seeing them as they were. I had to start to see people as they were. In the 12 and 12, it says we live in a world riddled with envy. It also says we live in a world where everyone is mentally and emotionally ill to some extent. Why would I follow you? Why would I want your approval? What does that say about me? See, I've been looking for people's approval all my life. We talk about this is getting kind of deep, but see, I know you don't see this in many. You guys ever been to a meeting where the topic was, what is this self that I'm bound to? We talk about freedom from bondage of self. Who is that? I can either live in the kingdom of I or the kingdom of heaven. So to back up with those horses, they've been such great teachers, and nature's been such great teachers to me, and I've learned a great deal from them. And what I find really fascinating about Alcoholics Anonymous and in this program is that when I go to lift you up, guess who gets lifted up? Me. But what happened for me is that movie, The Horse Whisperer, there's a guy named Buck. Did you know Buck? Okay. There's a great documentary. It's called Buck. Even my friends that don't like horses, they love the documentary. Some of them have seen it 2 or 3 times. So Buck did a clinic in L.A., and this really hit me. And I went to the clinic in L.A., and I've known him. I went and started cults with him. And I went there, and there were 30 people in the morning class, 30 people in the afternoon class. What I noticed is, a lot of people had Buck's hat. They had the same hat as him. They used a flag. They had his books and tapes. They had the same saddle. They had the same type of chaps. They sounded like him. It was really great. And I was like, wow, I was really impressed. I'm sure I'm average horseman. But the next day, we actually had to do things. Guess what? All the wheels fell off. Nobody could, there was only a couple people that could do it. And that's the same thing I found about the spiritual journey. It's so much easier to talk about than actually do it. Because I have to let go of something, and that's so scary. I used to always hear about it's fear of the unknown. It's not fear of the unknown, it's fear of letting go of the known. What I've been conceived. See, I never had the higher power of my own understanding. I had the higher power that I was taught when I was a little boy. Both of my parents my mom just passed away a few weeks ago, and my father passed away a year ago. I'm an only child. I don't feel alone. There's something here, but it's here in the here and now. I need to be present for it. That's what the steps do for me. It talks about that we're in full flight from reality. And if you're thinking about something that's not happening right now, guess what that's called? Fantasy. I lived in fantasy all my life. I had all these mental movies. I don't have to create the spiritual. I have to let go of everything that's blocking me from the light. That's why I like nature. It puts me into the light. That's why treatment centers brings their people out to the place where I'm at, because I need to put myself in position to get the light. Like I said, Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps was an answer to a prayer that I had when I was a little boy. I've gotten way beyond everything that I could possibly imagine. You know, like I said, when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was living on a Chevron credit card. I don't know how this has happened, but I had nothing for years. At 3 years of sobriety, I was riding around on a bicycle in Los Angeles sober. That's not humbling. That's humility. That's not humility. That was humiliation. And also what I learned too is the word humility. I didn't realize the definition of the word humility is to have a low view of my position and rank in the world. Well, man, that isn't what I was thinking when I was a kid growing up, because I was taught you got to get the highest position, the highest rank, be seen, be noticed. And I come in here in Alcoholics Anonymous and going, no, that's not what it's about, Brad. There's something else I was going to say on that. I kind of lost track of that. I'm going to open it up for, can I open it up for some questions? Does anybody have any questions for me? Anybody at all? You know what else I remember? Oh, this is what I was going to say. In the Sermon on the Mount, where it says the meek shall inherit the earth, I wasn't, as a young boy growing up, meek wasn't like on top of my list of being. You know what that meant? Without resentment. That made sense to me. Did you know that forgiveness meant to cancel out completely as if it never happened? That's where the freedom was at. Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how, what horses have taught you about God?
You know what the really cool thing is? Has anybody heard about the term unconditional love, right, with animals? Well, there's a couple things. One was the unconditional love, and so I started asking people, what does that mean to you? Well, it's unconditional love. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's unconditional love. Nobody really had an answer, but what I did realize is no matter what, and I've done things to horses that I'm not proud of, trying to get them started and everything, but what I did realize is that horse is always willing to give me a chance. He was always willing to let me start over. It's the most valuable thing in relationships you can possibly do, is to start over. To me, that is the most valuable thing to learn in a relationship, that ability to start over. Then the other thing, how many people here would rather be around animals than people? Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you. You know what I realized? And I kept asking people what that was about. But what I realized for me was the reason it's so easy for me being around the animal was I don't have any thought if he likes my hat, how my hair is, how my breath is. I mean, I used to eat garlic and then take my dog and go, and he'd just look at me because, like, what are you doing? They would just look at me because it wasn't a bad or a good smell. It was just a smell. The dog didn't care about presentation or anything else. And that, for me, that's when I realized why I like being around animals, because I didn't have all that self-concern. It was so liberating for me. That was one of the main things. And really, really realizing that to train an animal, same thing with horses. Kind of can do this with kids. But when I can be so tuned in that moment, when that horse, I call it mark training. So I have all my horses, it's about this big. All my horses will stand on this piece of wood with nothing on them, and I can lope circles around them, and they will not leave that. I can put it out in the field, and they will not leave it. The guy that taught me can take this and put it a mile away, and his horse will run and go stand on it and will not leave it. But to do that, I have to be so tuned in to that horse, what's going on. I have to be so present, because you can catch thoughts. You can catch attitudes when he thinks he's going to go. When he goes, I think I want to put my foot there and just relax. Man, he goes after, he notices that. See, what I realized it was, I don't really listen so much what people have to say. I watch their feet. When people come out for groups, I'm not interested in what they're saying. I'm interested in how they do it. Right? And with working with horses, people talk about picking up energy. You know, there is something to that, but it's my body language. It's how I carry myself. So with that horse, when you're working, started wild Mustangs before. So in that round pen, just this much, that horse is spinning. When I go like this, that horse will calm down. Just bringing my shoulder up will push him away. Going like this will pull him in. Just that much will pull him in. They're that toned in. They're that much in the moment. Wouldn't that be nice? We can do that. See, what I didn't realize is that my mind was meant for collecting facts for daily living only. How do I bake the cake? I don't bake cakes. How do I fix the saddle, okay? You know, how do I start my car? Those type of things. That's it. All that other chatter was the dis-ease of the mind. See, I can either live for my higher self, my recovery self, or I can live for my lower self or my addictive self. I'm always coming from something. I want God to be my from. But first, the prerequisite of that is I have to see myself as I truly am deep down inside. But it's so tough because I'm taught to go, here's my presentation. This is, I'm putting my best act together. But deep down inside, and I've worked with so many people. You know, there's a thing, don't kid yourself, I don't read poetry, but Longfellow wrote that if you could see that everyone secretly suffers, you'd be much kinder to each other. That changes it for me. Because I realize you're not responding, you're not doing anything to me, you're just doing what you're doing. And you're not doing it because of me, you're doing it because you're scared. Anybody else have a question? I didn't cover the topics that well. One. The last couple of years have been, well, I was going to say, so for this guy that had nothing, I have a home in California and overlooks the ocean. My place, have you been to my place, Rocky, out there? My home here in New Jersey is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I got this most amazing view. And now I have a home in the middle in Nebraska. And I don't know how that happened. I wish I could really tell you how I got sober, and I'm not really sure how this has happened. Because you had this guy with an eating disorder, and it was bad. I couldn't stop chewing. the love addiction, the sex addiction, everything else that I had going on. And you know what happened is, as time went on and the more I learned to connect to this thing that I call God, the more those things just kind of dropped off. Because what I realized is I don't even make myself walk. Something does that for me. The energy that makes my arm move is the identical energy that makes your arm move. Not only is it in you, it's in me, it's in those trees out there, and it's everywhere in between. That's what my God is. How does that go in it, move in it, my being? How does that go, Tom? You know that verse? Okay, I've made it up. I just made it up. Don't blow me out of the water, Tom. But it's kind of like the fish in the water. You know, that has the fish, the water's in his gill, and God is the water. I'm in it. And when I get connected to right here and I have conscious contact, there's a prerequisite to having conscious contact. I have to be conscious and aware. Through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've got a chance to find that. And I found some freedom and some peace of mind. Any other questions for me? Or, yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, because what I realized, that self that I've been really listening to all my life, that self that's telling me to do that is the very same self that says I'm going to use this weekend and I'm never going to use again. See, I kept trying to change myself. Nowhere in that book does it say change yourself. Everywhere in there, and I think that's what God is looking for. For me, God jumps up and down when I go, I'm wrong. I've been doing this thing completely wrong. When I saw myself as I truly was, and then I asked something higher to help me. God, help me. That's my favorite prayer. That's how I do that. But also what helped me is I started living out in Los Angeles. I was working with a guy, and he has 80-some cars. They're not collectible. He just bought them. He was worth I don't know how many billion, and I had a lot of financial insecurity. This was in the early 90s. And we were walking through the streets of Beverly Hills, and I had such financial insecurity. I had nothing. He finally stopped and he goes, "What's wrong with you?" And I go, I've got such financial insecurity and low self-worth. And probably deep down, I kept thinking, will he give me some? But he stopped and he looked at me in a way that I'll never forget. And he goes, "Yeah, me too." And I went, oh my God, it won't work. Then I've been around world champion athletes that sit down and talk and cry like a baby going, how do you get this sobriety? Guys that you've seen on TV, the football players that are, these guys look like they eat glass and breathe fire, sitting down, shaking, going, how do you get this? I thought they had all this confidence. And that's when I realized that everyone's secretly suffering, just like me. See, I was comparing myself, but like they said, I was comparing my insides to your outsides. I wasn't really paying attention to what you were really like. That's what I love about the humility came when I started to go, hey, when Bill Wilson and those guys got together, they didn't do written inventories. They sit down and go, I did this, this, and this, and, cringed. And the other guy goes, yeah, I did this, this, and this. And like, oh, wow, you too. Oh, my God. And there was started to get the freedom in there. But most of it, I started to realize that I've been listening to the enemy all my life. I didn't realize that I'm not responsible for the thoughts, I'm responsible for the thinking. And the tough part about it, I can't think my way to God. It's in the absence of thought that I found this thing called God. I found out who I truly was by finding out who I wasn't. I found God by finding out what God wasn't. I had a saying that I found one day, and it said that if your God is what you think about all day, what is your God? And I went, uh-oh. Everything but God. It was money, food, sex, other people in reference to myself. But it really wasn't God. Any more questions? Are we just going an hour? So to tell you at the end here, that thing is actually, it said the kingdom of heaven is in the space in between two thoughts. Go find that space, and I found that space. And I don't live there, but I found it, and I'm going to keep searching for it. Thank you so much for allowing me to come to your meeting. And thank you.
Brad, thank you so much for being here. Very much appreciate it. Thank you all for showing up tonight. I'm sitting there, and the only thing I can think about is, man, my mirror's going to look a heck of a lot different tonight. Whew. We all, compare and want to improve. And Brad, the way that you presented it to us this evening was just absolutely beautiful, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here tonight, and I appreciate all of you being here. Also, please join us next month. Have a safe drive home.